Welcome to the Aftershock. I'm Phil Leyva, here today with Alex Morgan and Jamon Moore. The Quakes have suffered another loss at home, guys. That is a 3-1 scoreline at the end of the match. They opened up with an early goal from Chofis, but then allow one from Lindsay, Pulido, and Shalawi. So they're taking another L at home. Guys, Alex, let's start with you here with initial thoughts following the match.
That was a surprisingly poor performance for the Quakes, I think, Phil. I thought they were I thought the matchup against Sporting Kansas City was pretty good for them. Sporting Kansas City are a team that tries to play out of the back, and the Quakes could have capitalized. They had the space, I think, in behind. They had the opportunities, quite frankly, to win this game, but they didn't take them. And that's the bottom line, is that the front line just hasn't been scoring goals. I mean, they have won in their last 3 games, and that's not good enough. And it's easy to look, I think, at Andy Rios tonight with that headed opportunity that he had in the second half and point fingers at him because, as the team's second highest paid player, he really needs to step up more. But I also think that, there was just wider issues in the team. It went beyond just Andy Rios. Kate Cowell had a very poor game. He started out wide for the first time, and that really just didn't work. Frankly, it didn't work. I think he's better up top. Colin, as much as we've been advocating Colin, and I thought it was, worthwhile to experiment with playing him out wide, but it just didn't work tonight. And, the Quakes' energy, they didn't respond well after missing those chances. It just went downhill from there.
Let's hear. What do you think, Jamon? What are your initial thoughts following the end of the match here?
Well, a couple of things surprised me. First off, I felt the team came out, fairly sharp, did a good job moving the ball around, but really it was a lack of pressure from Sporting Kansas City up until the Chofis goal. They made a bit of an adjustment. They switched their outside wingers and they changed the way that they were pressing, and they started marking out some of the central midfielders, which is the same thing that other teams had done to the Quakes. And sure enough, same result. They couldn't play out of the back. They basically almost gave up on it. JT kept hoofing balls. The one that resulted in a goal in the first half was a clearance that JT made to no one in particular, and not really under any pressure. It's almost like they gave up playing out of the back. In the second half, it was a story of transitions. The Quakes were very slow to transition. That was starting to happen in the first half too, and I had tweeted about it, but it kept happening. And both of those last goals basically came off of Kansas City throwing 4 players forward, and the Quakes not really getting into the man marking quickly enough. Kansas City just ping moves the ball around. They're very good at moving the ball around. They're very well drilled in moving the ball around. Sure enough, goals. The Quakes just didn't feel like they had the energy for the second half for a team that hasn't played in a week, should be rested, should be fully fit. They got run off the pitch, basically, particularly in the second half.
Yeah, and Sporting Kansas City, they just played a game on Sunday against the Vancouver Whitecaps as well. And we actually saw a lot of the same play from Sporting Kansas City as we saw against the Whitecaps as we saw against the Earthquakes, right? And one thing that we can really point out that Sporting Kansas City does really well, that Peter Vermees has the team do really well, that we haven't seen from the Earthquakes, and Jamie, you kind of alluded to this a little bit, was how quick Sporting Kansas City is on the break compared to the Quakes. And I'm going to point the finger here, as I can see some people are, showing their frustrations in the chat, to Andy Rios, because if there is one person that you need to be quick on the break and not get sucked into defending, it is that guy that's in the 9 position. And I kind of feel like Kansas City with Alan Pulido has been able to do that. They've been able to find that space in the very front of the formation, or if he needs to swing out wide, but he gets there quickly. He's so quick on the break, and Kansas City is so organized so quickly, and the Earthquakes were not able to do that this match. And that is something to me that is really troubling moving forward as we look ahead to the other games this season. And as I think, Alex, you mentioned in the pregame chat on the Twitter Spaces, the Quakes aren't going to be playing another home game for quite a while, with the exception of the game against the LA Galaxy.
Yeah, this was a particularly bad loss because they now have a really, really long road stretch, as you say, Phil. But quite frankly, this team might be better on the road, given they've lost their last 3 at home. Might as well mix it up and see. But I like the comparison that you were making actually between Rios and Pulido, because I think that just hurts for Quakes fans that the Quakes could have had Pulido if they're willing to make that investment, because he looks like just the perfect striker for Almeyda's system to find those spaces and, to finish like that. And, Brian makes the comparison here in the chat as well. And there are lots of comments here about, can you guys please explain what Almeyda sees in Rios? And, I would like to consider myself like an Andy Rios sympathizer in that I thought he struggled a lot in his first year in San Jose. But towards the end of last season, I think he found a really good role in that like number 10 position, number 9 position. And I thought he contributed a lot. He was a very functional player in there. But with a little different configuration now with Cade Cowell and Chofis, he just hasn't been able to find that right position. And he was just really, really poor tonight. And after he missed that opportunity in the second half, the energy the Quakes totally lost it. And they just really didn't look up for the task after that. It felt like mentally they had lost that edge, and mentally they were gone after that point. And I think that's also because they sort of got it in their head after the Seattle and Portland losses that, oh boy, here we go again. We're not converting our opportunities. And I think it felt like they let it get to them. And for a team that runs really hot and really cold, that's not a good sign.
And talking about Andy Rios here and his, Jamon, do you have any thoughts regarding Rios particularly, or did you want to simply follow up on some of the stuff that's been presented so far in terms of the team, their energy, and how they kind of tried to counter this attack from Sporting Kansas City?
Yeah, Alex, maybe you can pull up even some of the fan comments. I definitely want the fans to be heard tonight after another frustrating home loss. To me, one of the things that Sam mentions here is that he was a 10 last season. And a very different kind of 10. Asher Cohn did a great article about the type of 10 that he was. He operates with his back to goal as kind of this pivot 10, but he doesn't contribute the goals and assists. And I think what's really frustrating to fans and frustrating to everyone is he's the second most expensive player on the team. So if he's not adding goals and he's not adding assists, I think everyone would generally say, look, for the money that you're paying, this is not a team that spends frivolously. You have to be able to squeeze every dollar out of there. And I think Colin Etnier also on his piece on YouTube that we shared from Quakes Epicenter this week about the salary data, talked about how you have to get much more production out of somebody who is your second highest paid player. And arguably Carlos Fierro is the third highest, who's had a decent year. But, for your third highest paid player, you do expect a bit more. And so your second and third highest paid players right now are not adding that much in the attack. In the second, not really at all. A poor night from Andy Rios, although part of that I put on Almeyda because if you're going to play Rios, it does feel like you need to move him into that 10 where he can be efficient, even if that means you need to move Chofis out to the wing and allow Cade to play at the 9.
Well, one thing that certainly stood out too is Andy Rios is not finished as well. We're not talking about just how quick he is on the break, how he's distributing the ball, because he often does those things pretty well. We saw some of that in the previous match, against the Portland Timbers. But again, it isn't proving to be effective. And if you're not creating any chances from outside the 18-yard box, again, to make the comparison to Pulido as he was and as he did when he scored his goal, there's not a lot more that he can offer to this team. And so I think that's one of the big concerns that people are seeing. Maybe they're not able to articulate it because they're so often seeing like these terribly missed chances like we saw in the match, like you mentioned earlier with the missed header. But in addition to that, this match really highlighted some of the difficulties that Rios has been having finding his way into this team and being effective. And
I just think that Almeyda miscalculated this one tonight. The combination at the front just really didn't work. I think the first goal that the Quakes allowed was in large part because Cade Cowell lost his man on the wing. He didn't track back. And this was the first time we've seen Cade on the wing. It didn't work. He needs to be starting up top. I thought they missed Carlos Fierro in there. I think Fierro's crosses make this team more dangerous. And Chofis was actually a bright spot in the first half. I will say Trophies looked dangerous in the first half. He had their first goal early on, and you give him the ball in those spots right at the top of the box. I think that's where he scored all 3 of his goals for the Quakes. He had one early in the season, I think, against DC United. He had one in preseason against the Sacramento Republic, and tonight, all from the exact same spot, very similar finishes. And he looked quite dangerous, but the Quakes just didn't, even though they got the early goal, it never felt like they had the energy up top. They just totally looked flat-footed.
I think that we need to highlight that point right there one more time, because it's really important to see that extra dimension from just outside the 18-yard box is so important to making this team effective in this type of play, right? And this man-to-man marking system, this high press system, because Trophies came out and scored right away, and that was sort of like the opportunities that we want to see more from guys like Andy Rios that we haven't been seeing. As I just mentioned before, that is something that we also saw from Magnus Eriksson, right? Taking those shots from just outside the 18-yard box at the top of the box where the Quakes are finding space. But what's so often happening is they will not be able to get past that compressed defense, right? They won't be able to get past those defenders or come up with any creative ideas to get around them. Oftentimes we're seeing the ball get pushed out to the wing, a cross will come in, it immediately goes out, or the Quakes will lose possession. And all that possession that they maintain throughout the midfield, pushing up into the attacking third, amounts to not much of anything, which has been pretty disappointing, as Quakes fans to watch.
Yeah, and we're still seeing JT struggling with his distribution, and that's not really helping the team be able to play out right now. And like I said, even without a lot of pressure, he was just clearing balls out that normally those are balls that he's going to find that type of outlet that's going to help be able to break the press. It might take another pass or two, but he has to be able to start that. And if he's giving up on playing out as he was doing in the first half, it creates this kind of domino effect where it feels like the Quakes completely lost a hold of the game, lost the momentum in the game. They allowed Sporting Kansas City to kind of like refresh the press, mark out certain players. And now all of a sudden the Quakes seemed ineffective to be able to move the ball. And, that has to be figured out. Now, on the plus side, JT had some great saves tonight. And I don't like saying, things like, well, if it wasn't for JT, the Quakes wouldn't have given up, would have had more goals scored against them, because he's plugging another keeper and they're going to also make their saves too. But at the same time, he did make some pretty good saves that bailed the team out in situations where Kansas City just had players free in the box, at the top of the box, all over the place. The expected goals on this game, was definitely heavily slanted in Sporting Kansas City's favor, and that was even before the 3-1 scoreline. Toward the end, the Quakes got a bunch of half chances that pulled them back ahead. But the game's already 3-1. It's what I call game state XG. It doesn't mean much of anything. And the other thing that's disappointing to me is that Trophies' goal was another outside the box banger. This is not the way to be able to win games. You're going to have to produce goals in better ways. And I think some of that was the offensive transitions were too slow, as well as the defensive transitions were too slow. It was all just too slow. And it looked like every single time the Quakes had an opportunity, Sporting Kansas City had already adjusted to it. There was a great cutback toward the end of the game. Another situation where, they just adjusted to it and they were able to take the danger out of the play. Didn't even result in a shot on goal. Actually got blocked in that situation. And that was a similar story throughout the match. Every single time the Quakes got the ball in front. Sporting Kansas City, on the other hand, open looks at goal. JT had to make some saves. Alan Polito's quality, that finish, holy smokes. In the top corner, no one's going to get that. So it took a special thing to beat him, but they had, 3 special things tonight, and that was enough.
And Jamon, you talk about sort of the space in the midfield that they were allowing right in front of the backs, especially in the second half. And to me, if the Quakes had Judson in there, Sporting Kansas City probably wouldn't have had so many opportunities because Judson, his role is to close down that space. And as good as Eric Remedi has been going forward tonight, he was one of their more dangerous players, I thought. He's becoming a liability defensively. He had a pass, just like a dead giveaway in the first half that nearly led to a Sporting Kansas City goal. A couple other times he lost his marker. I just think that Judson needs to be put back in that starting lineup. He's had enough time now, I think, to get fit after missing most of preseason. And I think it's time. It's time kind of for Almeyda to go back to basics, I think, to get Judson back in there, to get guys like Jackson Ewell and Christian Espinosa on the ball because of how much focus I think has been placed on Cade Cowell and on Eric Remedi in the midfield. We haven't seen enough from Ewell and Espinosa. It feels like everything is going through those two guys, through Remedi and Cade Cowell, because they're kind of the hot players. When the most consistent, strongest contributors for the Quakes over the past couple of years have been Jackson Ewell and Christian Espinosa, and they're just not getting the ball enough. So I think that Almeyda needs to go back to basics and just put Judson in there. Now, I don't know if he will. Tonight, his body language on the touchline was strange, to say the least. I think a bunch of the Quakes Epicenter patrons were commenting on that in the Slack channel that we have. And Jamon had a screen grab that he posted on Twitter. He just had these strange sort of reactions and, like facial, expressions.
Annoyance.
Yeah. And I think it felt like that set the tone. It felt like sort of his reactions and his sort of disappointment and frustration in the second half, it kind of rubbed off on the team. And you started seeing guys like Christian Espinosa get frustrated. And it felt like, that was sort of the mental switch that turned off for the Quakes. And so that concerns me a little. And I'm curious to hear from him. We'll be speaking to Matias probably very shortly in the post-match press conference. So I'm curious to see what he says, because he certainly looked, his expressions on the touchline were just quite strange.
So I watched it at home, and yes, I totally agree. They were strange. Like at times, like he had his head up against the chair, like he was frustrated. He was leaning back. It was at times like it just looked like things were not going to plan.
There was a time someone mentioned, and of course we're not watching the broadcast, so we're missing, some of these antics and things that are going on the sideline, but that he seemed to get like a real warning from the official. And apparently he sent his translator, Augustine, to go in and say some things to the referee. And maybe the way he was acting there was he was kind of hiding behind somebody so he wasn't going to be seen, so that the officials wouldn't come at him. But there was some kind of strange stuff, going on there tonight for sure.
Quickly, if those of you who are watching right now on YouTube, I would like to hear or read what you thought about Matias Almeyda's antics, or whatever you want to call them tonight, because from my view, watching it on the broadcast, it was a bit of annoyance and maybe frustration, but there could be other things that I'm not quite okay. Almeyda looks sick, to be honest, says Daniel Zohar. Yeah, maybe he needs the purple sweater from Diane. Thank you, Diane. Perhaps that's another issue here. I do want to kind of counter something that you said here, Alex. Yes, I do agree that the coach's behavior is going to rub off on the team. But of all the people you could have picked on the team, I don't think Christian Espinosa necessarily was the guy that, like, perhaps he was frustrated, but I did see 100% commitment on a lot of the defensive responsibilities from him all the way up to the 94th minute. And there were times when, the team was kind of in these lulls. You could see it from Wondolowski. You could see from a couple of the other players on the team, maybe a little bit from our defenders. But you still saw Espinosa and Shea Salinas, too, to be fair, on the other side, committing to the defensive play and trying to push the ball forward, trying to push the team to score at least a single goal to get them back into the game. Now, they didn't. So, my counterpoint could be very, very easily brushed aside. But I do feel that Matias Almeyda's behavior is something that is very telling of how this team is performing, in the very least. And, hey, if you're losing 3 straight games at home, I mean, and you're the coach, you're going to be pretty frustrated.
Yeah, and I mean, I wasn't knocking Christian Espinosa by any means. I think he was frustrated because he was putting in the effort. And, he always gives 100% and tracking back. And he didn't see that reflected, I think, in his teammates and in the performance. It just looked very disjointed. And I'm enjoying the comments that are coming in here about Matias. People are saying, yeah, he looked super uncomfortable, was looking away from the field for a while, looked like he was done with this team and these players. And I think it's worthwhile to consider because, you talk about what happened last September and the Quakes were losing game after game after game. And it didn't feel like Matias knew how to get the team out of that situation. They just kept digging a deeper hole. And so after 3 straight losses, now you start to wonder, what he has up his sleeve, and whether he's willing to make tough decisions and change things up in order to, bring this team back to winning form.
Well, it's going to be right now. It's hard to imagine, right? It's hard to imagine this team bouncing back. Eventually, I suppose it will have to. But we saw some of this last season too, when they were taking these really big hits, right? There were these 6-0, 7-1 losses that they were taking. So we know that perhaps they have it within them to come back and perform and rack up some wins or get some points at least. But it's like there's not a light at the end of the tunnel at this moment. Things are really dark when you're losing 3 straight games at home, 2 of them against rivals from your conference. That's really, really tough to bounce back from. So unless you guys have anything else to state about Matias Almeyda's behavior, perhaps we can look at a couple of the other points from the match that maybe we can consider positives. Okay, I would like to look at the fullback position. Now, we did have one scary moment in which Paul Marie went down, and it kind of looked like, oh my God, this is like the one guy who, to me, has been earning his time in the fullback position, in the left back position for the team. But I wasn't seeing a lot of the overlap and creation from that position that I wanted to see, other than Paul Marie. He was like the one guy, right? We didn't see it from, there was some flair from Tommy Thompson, no doubt. He had a couple nice passes. He had a couple great touches. He brought the ball down, but we weren't seeing a lot of chances created from the position. Paul Marie was able to get into the attack. He made a couple nice square passes across the face of goal. He tracked back. He defended well. I'm interested on your guys' take on the fullback position, particularly. Jamon, you were nodding your head a second ago. Maybe you have a couple things you'd like to add in here.
I have to say, I'm getting really frustrated with Tommy Thompson. As much as I like Tommy, as much as he gives to this club, and as much as he's been an ambassador, for the club and for the youth. And I'm not saying, it's time to get rid of Tommy, but to me, the fullback experiment is kind of, it's getting long in the tooth with him. I was never fully sure about it to begin with. And the more I see it this year, the less I like it. I don't feel right now he should be starting at fullback for this team, other than in an emergency situation or to give someone a rest. There's no really positive thing that's coming from his play on either side of the ball. He's kind of just there. On the other side, I think Alex and I would agree, Paul Marie's been a huge surprise. Maybe the best positive story in the team this season has been I say rejuvenation. You'd have to be rejuvenated to begin with in order to be rejuvenated. But, his emergence, right? And he was a re-signing of the team in the offseason. To me, he's been by far the most dangerous of the outside backs. And he's able to go outside. He's able to make the runs. JT looked to him to help spring a counter tonight. He was the one thinking about it, finding the space, getting out in front, and JT was able to hit him almost in stride, with a hand throw. Maybe JT should try that more often. If he's struggling in these other passing areas.
Completely agree with that.
But that was about the only time where they really felt like they were going to be dangerous in a transition. There's maybe only a couple other moments tonight. But Paul Marie's in the middle of every one of those moments because he really does have a lot of energy going forward, and he's willing to put in the work to get back. Does he make defensive mistakes? Yes, he does. Part of that's a product of just not getting enough playing time over the last few years. I feel the more I see Paul Marie this season, the more I like it, and the more I really actually wish Almeyda would put him back on the right side and put him in place of Tommy Thompson and start him there, assuming a healthy Marcos Lopez, and have Lopez on the left, because right now I just don't feel like that Tommy's bringing enough. Abacasa's got in a bit late tonight. Overall, I've liked what I've seen with him, but I'm not entirely sure yet that he's ready to take on an every game start type situation.
One of the comments here says Thompson is not a good enough defender. That's for sure. He's not a defender at all, right? This was an experiment started by Matias Almeyda to put him at fullback. And, I credit to him, credit to his professionalism, to his work ethic, that he has, tried to adapt. But, the fundamental reason that it's not going to work is he just doesn't have the pace. he doesn't have the pace to compete with Major League Soccer's top wingers. And I don't think he has the defensive awareness either. And, the Quakes lost Nick Lima over the offseason. They didn't really get a great replacement for him. Luciano Abakasis has not stepped up enough so far this season. It was a weird signing in the first place. He was a 31-year-old coming from Paraguay. And I just think that was a pretty big whiff from the front office and from
just
Almeyda.
To add in, Alex, also considering the fact that we already have the Earthquakes already have Marcos Lopez as well. Just to add in there.
Well, Marcos Lopez was unfortunately injured tonight, and I think if they had Marcos Lopez in the picture, I would have actually liked to see. I would like to see Lopez on the left and Paul Marie on the right. We talked to Matias Almeyda about it at his midweek press conference. He's made it clear that he has Abakasis and Thompson on the right, and Lopez and Marie on the left. And I don't know why he's not considering Marie as like a full-time right back, because I think he played there today after Shea Salinas came on, and he looked really good. So I think that having Lopez on the left and Paul Marie on the right is probably San Jose's best combination when all of them are healthy.
For sure. And the other thing about Paul Marie too is, correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, he was a right-footed left back, right? So the goal that he scored against the Houston Dynamo was one in which he cut in from the left back position, got in front of goal, and then took the curling shot with his right foot. So we could also perhaps assume that in the right back position, he could be an effective crosser. He could be somebody who creates chances from that position as well. So maybe that's something else to consider with having Paul Marie at the right back position. So now that we've gone over the fullbacks, perhaps we can look at other parts of the field as well. We talked about Andy Rios. We didn't really talk too much about Chofis and his performance. We kind of talked about the goal a bit. It was a nice take, or as Jamon said, it was like a banger goal, right? Because it was from outside the 18-yard box. How are we feeling about Chofis in this position, playing underneath, the top of the formation? Perhaps, are we excited about what Chofis is bringing in this match? Or were we upset when he got subbed out early? What are your thoughts about that? Alex, you were nodding your head a second ago. Why don't we hear from you?
I thought he played well, and I said this earlier. I thought he played well in the first half. He was one of their standouts going forward, but I was not surprised when he was subbed by any means, because I don't think he has the fitness to go a full 90 minutes. I think he's usually one of the first subs that Matias Almeyda makes. But I think that if he can continue to build his fitness throughout this season, he'll be a dangerous piece going forward. And he is a DP, so I think you could probably expect even more contribution from him. I think that should be the expectation. In terms of goals per dollar spent, I think he's doing quite well compared to guys like Andy Rios or even Carlos Fierro in there.
I want to do a quick reset. So I want to first of all thank everybody who has tuned into the show so far. If you have any comments or questions, please put them in the comments section, and we'll see if we can get around to them, especially if they are something that stands out, something that's quite a bit different from what we've already been discussing. I see a lot of great comments in there, but a lot of the stuff is stuff that we've kind of like gone over. So if you guys have any other thoughts regarding that, we would love to hear it. Also, I want to mention that we are going to be covering the press conference. As of right now, we have Matias Almeyda, who will be joining us in the press conference, and we'll have questions for him. Guys, do we have any other word on if anybody else is going to be joining us this evening?
Not yet on players.
Okay, not yet on players. So
Matias is, I believe, joining right now. So
perfect. All right, perfect timing. So why don't we go ahead and go over to that, and then we'll talk about the questions afterwards.
With no translation. So let's go ahead and get started with Alicia Rodriguez.
Hi, Matias. Thank you so much for talking to us, and condolences on the loss tonight. To me, it looked like the first half was pretty even, but it seemed like the Earthquakes kind of faded in the second half. What did you make of the game, and what did you make of the difference in the halves in your team's performance?
Eso le pareció que los Quakes jugaron bastante bien el primer tiempo, pero que mientras pasaban un minuto, como iba aflojando. Puedo decir de cómo jugaron los dos tiempos del equipo.
Bueno, creo que hoy jugamos uno de los peores partidos nuestros.
Today, I think we played one of our worst matches.
Cuando arrancamos con con una jugada de pelota parada practicada que hicimos un gran gol.
We started off with a set piece play off the training ground that we scored.
Empezamos a tener el control,
We started to have control.
el rival no reaccionaba
The opponent was not reacting.
y empezamos a equivocarnos en pases fáciles.
And we started to make mistakes with easy passes.
Esto hizo que el rival tomara confianza
This gave the opponent confidence.
Y aprovechó, digamos, las situaciones creadas nuestras falladas.
And they took advantage of the chances we created that we missed.
El gol de ellos llega con una jugada que el día, siempre digo lo mismo, que Kay tenga mucho más años, va a defender esa jugada de adentro y no de afuera.
Their goal, like I always say, when Cade is a lot older, he's going to defend that play from the inside, not outside.
Y después hay una realidad que la diferencia en los contragolpes, ellos la aprovecharon.
And the truth is, with the counters, the difference there is that they took advantage of it.
Seguimos insistiendo, tuvimos nuestras posibilidades que fallamos nuevamente,
We kept on insisting. We had our chances that we missed again,
de adentro del área chica prácticamente, muchas.
pretty much in the 6-yard box, many of them.
Y cuando se compra un jugador como Pulido,
And when you buy a player like Pulido,
se paga tanto dinero porque sacas del medio.
you pay so much money for him because you're kicking off from the middle again.
Entonces hay realidades diferentes de un club y del otro.
So there's different realities from one club and the other.
Lo nuestro es más de juventud.
Ours is more about youth.
Sabemos que nos vamos a equivocar.
We know we will make mistakes.
Y muchos equipos, y sobre todo estos tres que hemos jugado y que hemos perdido,
Many teams, especially these 3 that we played and lost against,
hay una diferencia muy grande en ese sentido.
there's a very big difference in that sense.
No en el juego,
Not in the run of play,
porque de hecho los tres partidos creo que en el juego estuvimos a la altura compitiendo,
because I think in these 3 games we were at that level and competing.
pero sí queda muy marcado a la hora de esa parte individual, las inversiones de cada equipo.
But it is clear that in the individual part, you can tell the investments from each
Nosotros
team.
trabajamos mucho para darle confianza a nuestros jugadores
We work a lot to give our players confidence,
y somos conscientes que nuestro torneo es así.
and we're aware that our season is like this.
Cuando estamos muy finos para la definición sacamos ventaja
When we're very sharp to finish, we exploit it,
y cuando no estamos finos para la definición nos sacan ventaja.
and when we're not sharp to finish, they exploit it.
Thank you. Question from Jamon Moore.
Hi, Coach. Thank you for joining us. It felt in the second half that there were times where they had more energy, and in the transitions, it felt that the team was slow to respond. Some people watching on television said that the team looked tired. Did you feel that the team didn't respond as quickly as they should in situations? Do you think that had a big impact in the game tonight? Thank you.
Así que parecía en transición que el equipo estaba como más lento y que algunos en la televisión decían que el equipo se veía como cansado. Si vos pensás que eso fue el caso y cómo eso afectó el partido.
Yo creo que se veía eso, sí, coincido.
I think you could see that. Yeah, I agree.
Pero todos los días le pregunto a cada uno de los jugadores cómo se siente.
But every day I ask the players, how do they feel?
Creo plenamente cada vez que me hablan.
I completely believe them every time they talk to me.
Y lo primero que les pregunto a ver si tienen alguna molestia o están cansados.
And the first thing I ask them is if they have anything bothering them or if they're tired.
Nuestro juego es dinámico,
Our game is dynamic,
pero el partido de hoy creo que había muchos espacios.
but in today's game, I think there was lots of spaces.
Entonces se quedaban muy expuestos de los dos lados.
So it was left exposed on both sides.
De hecho, hubo situaciones de gol de los dos lados,
In fact, there was situations for both sides,
como sucede cada vez que jugamos con Kansas.
just like how it happens every time we're up against
Siempre
Kansas.
hay muchos goles.
There's always lots of goals.
Se hacen partidos abiertos
There are open games
y de mucho espacio.
and with lots of spaces.
Y cuando no estás con la marca justa,
When you're not with your mark, you're not tight with your marks,
eso se nota.
you can notice that.
Thank you, Matias. Next question from Alex Morgan.
Unmuted.
Hi, Matias. Thank you for speaking with us tonight.
Ay, Alex.
You said that this was, the worst performance from your team this season. After 3 losses in a row, are you now worried about the trajectory of the team? And do you feel like you need to change anything in terms of lineup or game plan in order to turn things around?
Muted.
Vos dijiste que vos pensás que este es el peor partido que ha jugado el equipo, ya con 3 partidos, con 3 derrotas seguidas, y estás preocupado por la trayectoria del equipo y sentís que tenés que hacer algunos cambios con la alineación o planteo de partido para salir.
No, digo que era el partido más fácil que había resultado a los 5 minutos.
I say it was the easiest game after 5 minutes.
Creo que por momentos dejamos de hacer lo que estamos acostumbrados.
I think for moments we stopped doing what we were used to doing,
Hicimos que el rival tomara confianza.
and we gave the opponent confidence.
En líneas generales digo que el partido no me gustó porque con momentos buenos
In general lines, I say that I like the game because at moments
en los cuales por intermedio de nuestro juego colectivo creamos la situación de gol
in which throughout our collective play, we created goal scoring chances,
y momentos muy malos
and very bad moments
donde el rival no perdonó.
where the opponent did not forgive us.
Después nosotros no tenemos mucho que modificar porque el plantel nuestro es muy corto.
After that, we didn't have much to change because we have a very short roster.
No es un justificativo,
It's not a justification,
pero creo que buscaremos la manera para otra vez revertir la situación como lo hacemos habitualmente.
but we'll look for a way to overcome the situation as we normally do.
Thank you, Matias. We're going to switch over to the Spanish portion now and take 2 questions, starting with John Rojas.
Thank you, Matías, gracias por el tiempo.
No, por favor.
Es frustrante incluso desde afuera ver cómo se falla una, cobran, te falla una, cobran y el partido se fue. Ya lo ha explicado, pero definitivamente entonces la gente tiene que acostumbrar a que San José es así y punto, o existe la posibilidad de que haya una decisión de inversión, de subir la calidad adelante durante la temporada para que usted pueda tener un poco más de herramientas.
No, creo que hoy está así como está y nosotros tenemos que sacarle lo mejor a cada jugador. Nosotros confiamos mucho en cada uno de ellos. El problema en el fútbol para mí es cuando vos no creás situaciones. Entonces ahí sí te tenés que replantear un montón de cosas y darte cuenta que te estás equivocando mucho. Ahora, está dentro del fútbol y de la parte de vida de cada ser humano equivocarse a veces. Y bueno, cuando te equivocás adelante es que no convertís. Pero para tener la posibilidad de intentar convertir es porque hubo una elaboración previa. Entonces analizo un poco más profundo eso. Y digo, bueno, los 2 partidos pasados que jugamos con grandes equipos y llegaron muy poco y nos hicieron goles. Y nosotros llegamos un montón y no los pudimos concretar. Ahora, hace 3 semanas atrás hacíamos 3 goles, 4 goles, 2 goles. Entonces, va a volver, pero habíamos tenido ese inicio tan bueno y bueno, estas derrotas es como que hay que activar rápidamente.
Matias, final question to Carlos Ramirez.
Profe, ¿cómo le va, Carlos? Mauricio Ramírez, un abrazo.
¿Qué tal, Carlos? Un abrazo.
¿Cómo manejas algo que no depende de ti como la definición? Porque se entrena, se ensaya, se practica durante la semana, hay la parte táctica, pero ya el resto queda para los jugadores. ¿Cómo manejas tú esa parte como entrenador cuando ya ha pasado en 3 partidos consecutivos?
No, yo soy muy consciente siempre de esta parte, ¿no? Sobre todo cuando hay jóvenes. Los jóvenes, y el día que tengan 25 partidos en la primera, y va a haber movimientos que lo van a hacer de una manera natural. Y bueno, ahí entra ese proceso con respecto a ellos. Y por eso cuando arrancamos, que nuestros jóvenes estaban y que se hablaba, se acuerda que yo bajaba a tierra todo, ¿no? Porque llevo como 25 años en el fútbol y he visto muchas cosas, la verdad. Entonces, tomo siempre todo con mucha tranquilidad. Después el trabajo seguiremos insistiendo, porque esto también recién inicia y de repente hoy veía a Galaxy que también le metieron 3 goles. Bueno, el fútbol es un poco así. Lo importante es que no pierdan confianza ellos. Ellos tienen mi confianza e intentaremos seguir trabajando para que logren desbloquearse, ¿no? Muchas veces los jugadores de fútbol se bloquean y pasa esto. Y bueno, intentaremos por todos los medios desbloquearlos rápidamente para seguir produciendo acciones de gol y que ellos puedan definirlas, como en otras ocasiones ya lo hemos visto.
All right. Thank you very much, Matias and Augustine.
Buenas noches. Good night.
Some pretty strong words there from Matias Almeyda, starting with the sentiment that this match was one of the worst performances that they put out on the pitch this year, which are, that says a lot. I don't think we're surprised considering we already talked about his body language. One of the other things that I thought was quite interesting was your question, Alex, about, whether or not the team would, or he would change anything about the team and the performance. So I was wondering if, you have any reactions after asking that question to Matias as to what he said about it.
I mean, now we know why he looked so frustrated on the touchline. As he said, it was just, he felt that they let Sporting Kansas City back in the game because they were making careless errors in the middle and were just very sloppy. And that's why his reactions were so strange. And I would add that I think that the commenters here caught it. He's starting to take some shots at San Jose's ownership. He's mentioning sort of the contrast between, teams that are willing to sign Alan Pulido, willing to make that investment, and, what he's working with, because San Jose's ownership is not willing to make that investment. And you saw some of that back and forth between him and the ownership in September when the Quakes were struggling last season. And they had some, I think, pretty tense conversations. And it's interesting now that some of that tension might be resurfacing.
And Jamon, you have any follow-up thoughts after the Matias Almeyda presser as well?
No, I mean, effectively, he agreed with our assessments, Alex and I both. The game was effectively lost because they didn't bring the necessary energy and because, they were unable to continue playing the way that they started the game. Whether that was on the Quakes or whether that was an adjustment on Sporting Kansas City. I'd like to get a little bit different perspective on it. We have someone with us who had joined me earlier in the week. And I'd like to bring him on now, Daniel Sperry. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. This is a bit of an experiment. We've never had someone covering the other team on before, but we trust you because you do love the Quakes too.
Yes.
As basically a neutral for the game, how did you see this playing out? From Matias's perspective, he said, look, we had a hold of the game and then we lost a hold of the game. I happened to notice that Peter Vermees looked like he made some adjustments in the way that the press was, and he was putting a lot more pressure after that initial goal and kind of changed the marking scheme and switched the size of his wingers. What did you kind of see as you thought was the turning point of the game?
Yeah, I think we had issues with our TV out here, unfortunately. So in the middle of this game, this is kind of chopping in and out, kept on blacking out and saying, "Oh, you don't have access to this channel." So unfortunately, the continuity of the play was very lost in the snippets that we saw for that first half. One thing I think changed though is I'll say I noticed this, that the overall work ethic from Sporting Kansas City, I think they weren't there for the first 5 minutes. They were kind of sleepy. It's like 9 o'clock out here when that game kicked off. It seemed they just seemed a little slow. There wasn't a lot of movement, and I don't know who said something or what was said, but clearly that picked up as they started to get some chances in there. And from Peter Vermees' press conference, what he said was that goal that was scored, Jalen's goal, I think, broke the confidence of the Earthquakes, and for him, that was the turning point of the match. He felt that San Jose with each goal continues to grow in confidence as they go, and they got one very early, and to peg them back pretty quickly, I think they kind of lost it. There's a really great freeze frame of that goal that shows where Pulido was being hounded. There's about 3 or 4 players around him before he slipped that ball into Jalen. And those players aren't necessarily they're all marking one man instead of an individual thing. So I almost feel like I kind of heard a little bit of Matias's presser when I was sitting in the backstage and kind of tracking along with you guys. It feels like Matias felt like the team kind of got away from some of the things that they do well. And I definitely noticed that it wasn't in the middle of the field. They weren't as tight to the man marking scheme and kind of left a lot of spaces in places where a guy like Jalen Lindsey could run. And, I think back to Daniel Shalhoub's goal. Gadi Kinda sprints down the middle of the field, drags 3 or 4 defenders with him, all paying attention to Gadi Kinda's run. Daniel Shalhoub was never, the moment he picked that ball up on his left, I thought there's no way he's going to pass it to Gadi Kinda. He's going to try and cut in on his right and curl that into the top corner because that's his favorite shot. He had the time and space to do it, and he did it. And so there's a lot of things that I think it just seemed a very uncharacteristic mistakes in the man marking scheme that San Jose or Sporting Kansas City really capitalized on in the transition.
Yeah, Daniel, you highlighted something that I was thinking about, and that is the dimension of attack that SKC brought into this match. And one of them was from the fullback position, being able to find space and actually score a goal. Prior to the match, I had mentioned to you on Twitter that the team is going to look slightly different without Graham Zusi being in there. And if anybody here watched the match against Vancouver, you will have seen that Graham Zusi had a particularly good performance. So my question was, what was Lindsey going to bring to this? You already answered that question. The other thing I was considering was what your thoughts about the midfield performance, the central midfield performance from this team, maybe particularly Roger Espinoza, because in that match against Vancouver, similarly, he found that space and created a lot of trouble for the Vancouver defense. We didn't quite see as much of that against the Quakes tonight. So kind of, is this a certain is this normal sort of performance from Roger Espinoza in the central midfield? Or does this seem like the sort of change that Peter Vermees made that the Quakes weren't expecting and just didn't adapt well to?
Were you senses in like tonight was good, and is that normal what we would expect from Roger? Or
well, I'm actually curious about whether or not Roger Espinoza had much of an impact on the match from your view. I guess that's kind of what I'm getting
yeah, and that's the question that we've been trying to answer in Kansas City. I think what Roger does is that when he does get on the ball, he does not make very many mistakes. Although there was one really weird pass that he sent in there that just went way wayward in the first half, and I was on my couch like, what the heck was that? Because he doesn't make those kind of mistakes normally. But some of the issues that they had in their losses, and I mentioned this talking to Jamon, was with careless mistakes in the midfield from certain players who get on the ball, and Roger just rarely puts a foot wrong when he's on the ball, and he has a very physical, driving, sometimes vertical presence when he gets on the ball and finds space. And within the man marking scheme, you watch how quickly Busio, Kinda, even Ilie Sanchez played the ball vertically through the Earthquakes midfield and got forward and left Roger with a lot of space to kind of carry in. So I thought actually tonight was one of his better matches, but I think, from a Sporting Kansas City fan base has been kind of questioning, how much has he been bringing to it? Because you look at the work rate, what Busio did tonight was phenomenal. Gadi Kinda was incredibly electric, driving forward at people and creating space for others. Roger kind of, without Ilie in the central midfield as they normally have, Roger has had to kind of be that safe space that I think is kind of important to their overall midfield scheme.
So it looks like we're cutting over to the presser right now. Tommy Thompson. Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, no, it's really frustrating for us. I mean, after starting the season so well, to drop 3 games at home is unacceptable, and it feels like we're just coming up short. I mean, after starting tonight's game so well, we have to be able to put teams away, especially at home. And I think we took our foot off the gas pedal. I think we dominated throughout the majority of the first half. And like I said, we took our foot off the gas pedal, and credit to Kansas City. They're a clinical team, and they took advantage of the few chances that they had, and they made us pay. But I think we're doing well to put teams on the back foot and creating chances. We just got to put them away.
Thank you, Tommy. Next question from Alicia Rodriguez.
Thank you. Tommy, you guys have experienced ruts before. Last season, you had a pretty big one and you came out of it. What lessons from that experience can you learn for trying to turn it around now and trying to get out of a losing streak before it really stretches on?
Yeah, I think that's a benefit that we have in this group. We've been through a lot together, whether it was 2019 or 2020, and now what we're experiencing right now. This team's dealt with adversity, and we know how to get through it. I'm still feeling confident. I think losses like tonight, they hurt because we know that we can do better, and you could feel that we had the ability to win that game. It feels like it was right there for us, and we just didn't take advantage of it. So our locker room isn't getting our heads down. We're not down on ourselves at all. We're just frustrated that we haven't executed in the way that we wanted to. But I think next weekend's the perfect opportunity to bounce back in the Derby game in LA.
Thank you, Tommy. We'll take two more questions, starting with Jamon Moore.
Hi, Tommy. Thank you for taking the time. Early in the game, it didn't seem like you were facing a lot of the same kind of high pressure that you've been getting from other teams from Sporting Kansas City, at least up until the goal. After the goal, it seemed like they made some adjustments, and it made it very difficult for you guys, again, to play out through the press. Is this becoming almost self-inflicted at this point? Are teams sensing that this is the way to play against the Quakes and be able to have some success? And how do you guys reverse this? Thanks.
I think we have a style of play that we're going to insist on. Matias has been very clear with that, that we're a team that's going to do our best to control the game and control the ball. And I thought for large points of this game, we did do that well. We just lacked the precision in a couple of moments, and Kansas City made us pay. But we're not getting down ourselves. I think the most important thing is to not get too high or too low. A lot of people were talking really highly of us when we went on the 3-game win streak, and that didn't affect us. And now whatever negativity is out there is not going to affect us either. We're staying level-headed. We believe in what we do. We believe in our style of play, and we're going to keep insisting on that. We just got to sharpen up, and the results will come.
Thank you, Tommy. One final question from Carlos Ramirez.
Hi, Tommy. It's Carlos. How are you?
Doing well, thanks.
Where do you feel more comfortable, as a fullback or a winger? Because, I mean, you flip-flop. I mean, Matias has used you on several spots, mostly as a fullback. But where do you feel more comfortable, and where do you feel your best soccer might flourish?
In Matias' system, I've played almost solely as a outside right back or outside left back. And in the system, it's like a wing back, and I'm very comfortable there. From the beginning, right when Matias got here, he said, we're going to try you in this position. We think you have a skill set that can do well there. And since then, I've embraced it, and I feel really comfortable there. And I love being there. I think I link up well with Christian or Carlos Fierro when he's out there on my side as well. And it's something that I've really enjoyed. It's been a welcome change for me. But I'm also comfortable as a center midfield. I'm also comfortable as a winger. But right now with Matias, he likes me at outside back, so I'm going to play outside back.
Thanks, Tommy.
All right. Thank you very much, Tommy, and thank you all for being with us tonight.
Well, we had brought up the point about Tommy Thompson playing in the fullback position, and he directly addressed that in the presser. So he says he feels comfortable there, that he likes combining with Christian Espinoza and at times with Carlos Fierro as well. And he also made a couple comments about how they like to control the game. They control the ball. It's kind of their gameplay that Matias has them set out to do. However, I think some of the issue there, as we already highlighted earlier in the show, is that they're not quick enough on the change of possession or on the counterattack, right? Or being able to get the ball up the field quickly enough to do anything other than try to create something up the middle or from outside the 18-yard box. So, guys, I think we're going to go back to one of the comments that Matias Almeyda made really quickly here in regards to the team asking the players personally if they feel tired or have anything bothering them prior to the matches. What are your thoughts on these comments from Matias Almeyda? Because this is kind of a new insight coming from him and coming from the locker room.
That was strange, and shout out to Marcelo here for catching that during the press conference. He said, I felt like Matias threw a little bit of shade towards the players by suggesting that maybe some of them were tired but didn't confess to that. because they didn't want to lose their starting spot. And I'm really curious who he's referring to there, because as you and Daniel were saying, in the midfield, there was just a lot of space. In fact, all over the pitch, it looked like they were a step off the pace tonight. And, Almeyda is suggesting that some of that is fitness. Some of that is the players really weren't fit tonight. And, I'm trying to think who that could have been. I think Tommy Thompson is maybe one of the players in there. I think possibly Eric Remedi as well. But the fact that Matias Almeyda is calling out his players in that way, basically suggesting that they were dishonest, is I think concerning for the Quakes, given that so much of what makes this team good and exciting and fun to watch is how unified they've been behind Matias Almeyda, and how much they're committed to the project. So the fact that there might be some tension underneath the surface is, I think, a pretty big cause for concern.
And Jamon, thoughts on Matias Almeyda's comments, or we can also move over to some of the other things we wanted to discuss in regards to Cade Cowell, the amount of pressure that the team, or reliance is probably a better word, not pressure. The amount of reliance that the team is putting on Cade to perform, because as we've seen prior, when Cade performs well, the team tends to do a little better. So just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Matias actually, mentioned him. I believe it was with Alicia's question, in that he's going to have to talk with Cade about his positioning because he was outside instead of inside on the man when they gave up the first goal. And then he continuously kind of came back to these comments about having young players, and they have Polito. I have young players. I actually want to point out that I feel like the Quakes are depending a little bit too much on Cade Cowell. I feel like there's a bit of a hope and pray that Cade's going to create some magic for us, attitude right now, and we're just going to keep hitting the ball to Cade. Cade's not the guy who turned the season around last season, right? That was players like Jackson Ewell. That was players like Marcos Lopez, and of course he wasn't healthy tonight. That was players like Beeson, who came in and made some change in the back line, and it was JT. And to a greater extent, and Judson, and it was your DP Espinoza. You have one real DP. Let's be honest, right? And Christian Espinoza is that guy, and he got an assist tonight, but it was on a set piece. And other than that, he really hasn't been super effective distributing the ball this season as much as other seasons. I don't know whether that's on him or whether teams are just deciding they're not going to let Christian Espinoza beat them. But I feel like there's a little bit too much of the hope and pray that Cade's going to bail us out with some sort of thing, rather than playing with the people who kind of brought you to the dance to begin with, who actually turned this into a highly competitive team that was able to go into Sporting Kansas City and scare them, into an overtime situation that they didn't want to be in last season. That Quakes team is not the one that we're seeing right now. It's too reliant on these players that they've brought in, and I don't really see the reason for it, to be quite honest. If I believe that Cade is going to be in a better situation when he's not drawing as much attention. He has the ability to be able to do something because he's got the space and ability to do it. Tonight, I saw a lot of double teams on Cade Cowell, but yet they still kept going to the well. And I would really like to see them get back. And yes, Judson needs to get onto the field. But I would like to see them get back to what made them good last season. And then Cade is great. And let's give Cade those chances and those opportunities, but let them come naturally in situations and not force them through him.
Yeah, we'll put there, Jamon. I totally agree with that point. Why don't we move into the final thought segment here of the show? I'm going to pass to Alex since Jamon just spoke, and then Daniel, if there's anything else that you'd like to contribute, we'd love to have you contribute as well. So, Alex, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you, and we'll just go around the table.
Yeah, I think Jamon, his assessment there was totally right. It felt like the Quakes were trying to force it through Cade Cowell and force it through Eric Remedi. And Cade, I think, looks like he's lacking in confidence. He's definitely not as composed and as dangerous on the ball as he was a couple weeks ago when he was scoring tons of goals. And so I just think they need to start playing through Espinosa and Jackson Ewell a little bit more. And this next stretch of games is going to be really tough for them, going on the road for almost 2 months. And so they need to step it up. If not, I think it'll be a long summer for them. And it's good that they got 3 wins at the start of the year, because now they're sort of sliding back down the Western Conference standings. And I think after tonight, you can kind of feel a little bit of the frustration, and there's almost a sense of impending doom in that some of the same recurring issues are happening over and over again. And if they don't fix it soon, that could put them in a really tough spot. And so, it was just a poor performance overall. And I think for most everybody, Quakes fans, Almeyda, it was basically a night to forget.
And let's go ahead and move over to Jamon. And really quickly, I want to answer a question that Marcelo has. It's a great question. Is there another player we are waiting for, or is the presser done? That's it for tonight. We had Matias Almeyda and Tommy Thompson. That was it for the press conference.
And I will add that usually we talk to 2 players after the game. But, the Quakes, when they lose, I think they don't like to come in front of us and talk about it as much. I think we waited on Matias Almeyda quite a bit longer tonight than we usually have to. That also happened last season when they were losing in September. So I'm not entirely surprised. In fact, that is, I think, one of the signs for me that this team is frustrated and disappointed and playing poorly, is that they're after the game, they are talking through things very thoroughly with Matias Almeyda. When they're winning and playing well, it's usually very quick and punctual.
All right, we're going to go ahead and go to Daniel next, and then we'll go to Jamon last.
Yeah, just some final thoughts. I will kind of what Jamon echoed, felt like, or said. I'll echo that about Cade being a kind of a focal point for San Jose. One thing Peter Vermees mentioned in his press conference was that San Jose is a very right-sided team. They really like to get up the right, hence why if you kind of check out the passing map and some of the average player positions from the early returns so far, you can see that Kaveh Rod was the left center back, and he's pinched up really tight next to Luis Martins, and there's a giant gap in the middle. And if you look at where the San Jose Earthquakes passing map is, Cade Cowell is really far out on the right hand side, out kind of on his lonesome, and there's nobody that's kind of set up in the middle. So I thought that was very interesting, kind of secondary or affirmation of what Jamon was saying about what Sporting Kansas City was trying to do to them. But for the Quakes, I think there's just now 3 games in a row where a team has beat them in a very similar way, in a quick way of passing quick through the middle, moving players in and around, and with press or quick vertical play through the middle of the field, being able to break down San Jose's own press. I think it was that's a sign. All right, there's something that San Jose can work on, but I'm sure San Jose fans, that as we have all been very guilty of doing in the past, it's very easy to kind of after this get really. Thanks, Michael, for the compliments or the nice words about the out of town perspective as well. But just briefly, I think goodness, I lost my point there. But sorry,
No worries, Daniel. No worries.
Sorry.
Yeah. Bring it back around.
But yeah, this is 3-way. Okay, I had said that 3 teams in a row doing the same thing pretty much to beat them. So earlier in the season, Sporting Kansas City kind of got beat in 2 of the same ways. Sporting Kansas City's fan base very quick to just, dismal. We're down. This is going to be a really rough season. It's 2019 all over again. Now they've ripped off 2 wins against opponents and pretty much played very. Maybe not truly dominant tonight, but dominant in a different sense than they were against Vancouver. So I think that things can turn around quickly very early in the season. So 3 games, right? So there's a pattern. So what do the Quakes do to fix it? And I think that's what Quakes fans should be looking at. We got a long ways to go in the season. So first little bit of a road bump, and kind of see what changes Almeyda makes and what the Quakes end up looking like going forward.
Perhaps not a dominant performance from Sporting Kansas City, but anytime you go on the road and you get 3 points, that's really important, really special, and it is always a huge positive for a team. So thank you for that perspective, Daniel. We all appreciate it. Let's go to Jamon next.
Yeah, I think Mark McCarran-Fraser has got a great comment here. And by the way, he might be new to the show. I don't recall him commenting that much before anyway, but we've got a lot of new people tonight. Thank you to everyone who showed up tonight and a lot of new commenters, and we really, really like that. Sometimes the things that are said are things that we've talked about on this show before, and so if we don't address them right away, just know that we're going to try to get in as many comments as we can. Yeah, other teams are adjusting to us and we're not adapting, but that's a very common thing that we've talked about before with Matias Almeyda. He wants to play his way. He wants to play his game. He wants everyone to adapt to him and play. But when the other teams make these adjustments, we saw it last season in that teams would make adjustments at halftime, and then they would come out early in the second half and get a goal on the Quakes. And the Quakes didn't know what hit them because they hadn't understood what the adjustment was that was being made quite yet. This season, it's happening in the first half. And teams have already decided that they're going to come out in a certain way, and there's no tape of how these teams are going to come out and play because they haven't played necessarily the way that they're going to play against the Quakes, against other teams. And now everything's a surprise, and they're trying to figure it out. And I think like tonight, Vermees adjusted to the game state and changed the way that he was going to play. Almeyda did not. He kept insisting on playing, his particular way. And when things, started to fall apart, Almeyda was quick to say that the players, didn't do this, the players didn't do that, or I'm throwing out kids, or I don't have the quality that I need, whatever the case is. So, this is getting a little bit into the territory that we would hear last season where the excuses start to come out for some of these losses. I think it's going to be very interesting if the Quakes go into LA and have another one of these performances. We need to, really kind of be watching, kind of these types of comments, pretty carefully going forward, because this is where the team kind of got into last year, and it took a lot to get out.
And I very briefly here just want to shout out Mark again, because Mark, I remember you. I remember your comments. Jamin might not remember, but I appreciate. We appreciate.
I'm the old guy.
Anyway, I'll toss it back to you, Phil.
Okay, so first of all, the Aftershock wasn't around last year, so how about that? That's a point back to Jamin. I know you're talking about Black and Ozil. I'm just kidding. Anyway, I have a couple points that I want to make before we close out tonight. And one of them, and I already made this a couple of times, but I want to reiterate again because it's really important. The Quakes need to be quicker on the counterattack. They need to be quicker on punishing other teams when they make mistakes. So the one that really stood out to me tonight was Kyrie Shelton's just absolute terrible ball that he delivered straight to Quakes player, which they did not take advantage of. By the way, they had the numbers, they had the position on the field, and yet they didn't even really create a solid chance to score from that mistake that Sporting Kansas City made. So Quakes need to punish opposing teams when they make those sorts of mistakes, and they need to be quicker on the counterattack. Those are really important. Another one that I think is important to mention before we close out is dimensions of attack. And I know this is like super obvious, right? If you have more dimensions of attack, you're going to have more opportunities to score chances, or you might catch the opponent on their back foot. But when Christian Espinoza, after the start of the second half, around the 53rd minute, made that cut from the left side into the center of the pitch and took a shot, those are the types of attacking opportunities that we need to see more often from the team if we want them to be less predictable, and if we want to see the opposing defenses every single time the Quakes go into the attack either intercept the pass or simply block the opportunity from happening, forcing a corner kick, forcing a goal kick, or these other sorts of opportunities that the Quakes simply aren't taking advantage of. Now, to be fair, they did score from a corner kick tonight, which we hadn't seen them score from a set piece the entire season, with the exception of the Alanis penalty kick from earlier in the year, which really a penalty kick, that's contentious whether or not we're going to consider that a set piece type of play. So it was good to see the Quakes do that tonight. However, they're still not taking advantage of those opportunities, as Tommy Thompson said during the press conference. So those are my closing thoughts. Let me go ahead and do a quick bit of housekeeping here. Marcelo says, if anyone in the comments hasn't become a patron for them yet, I highly recommend Insider News First, amazing group chat, and access to articles by amazing guys that cover the Quakes. Thank you, Marcelo. Those guys that write the articles for the site are amazing. And the Patreon is Quakes Epicenter, as Marcelo said. And thank you. Pretty much did my job there, Marcelo. I really appreciate it, because that was the next thing I was going to talk about, was the Patreon. For just $2 a month, You can not only contribute to have this content come out after every match, have those wonderful articles who are written by Alex and Jamon and Colin Etnier and Asher Cohn and everybody else who contributes to the site. And you get the exclusive pictures from Aaron Morgan, which are really awesome as well. You get all that if you become a patron through Patreon. For $5 a month, you can also join our Slack, our private chat that we have, our spicy takes that don't always make it onto Twitter, don't always make it onto the Aftershock podcast. You can get on there. You can join us. There's a great group of folks who are on there who have a lot of wonderful ideas to contribute, and you can get in on that fun as well for just $5 a month. And then there's another option as well for $15 a month. And if you go on our website, www.quakesepicenter.com, you can find out all that information and more. You can also follow us on Twitter at, well, let's take a look at this comment from Michael real quick. Don't forget to like and subscribe, y'all. Let's get them to 1,000 for the sweet, sweet ad revenue. Thank you, Michael.
Not only the ad revenue, but you guys get some special tools, some special things that you can have in your chat to be able to interact with. It's going to be a lot of fun. So please help us get to 1,000. All you need to do is subscribe to the show. And the great thing is you also get notified when we do a poor job promoting the show. You get notified when the shows are going to be and when they're starting.
Thanks, Jim, for adding that in there. Yeah. So there's a lot of fun stuff that we can add to the YouTube as well, which actually, if you join as a patron for $5 a month, you can see what we're doing on the Slack. And it's kind of silly, some of the ideas that we've come up with. So you can check that out. Last thing, social media, follow us at Quakes Epicenter. That is the host for the Aftershock podcast, Quakes Epicenter. Once again, you can follow Alex at Quakes_talk. You can follow Jamon at JMoreQuakes, and you can follow Daniel Sperry at SperryDaniel94. You could follow me at Phil. This is Phil for all of our takes on the earthquakes and a lot more. So I want to thank everybody who joined us on the YouTube tonight for all the comments. They were outstanding. You helped us push the show forward. I want to thank you all for that. It makes our job a lot easier as well. And make sure you check out Quakes Epicenter and go Quakes. Have a good night.